welcome to another episode of Passing Time with Craig. As always, I'm your host, Craig McFarland, and we're continuing to social distance. And today I've got there's a long list here. We got activist, public speaker, musician, but Pam Rocker. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. It's really lovely to be here. I've been following you on Instagram and just waiting, hoping, wishing that you would notice me one day.
Oh, I noticed you. I mean, first of all, the first thing I want to mention is you're top 40 under 40 for Calgary. Like, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I forget, but yeah, that was a really phenomenal thing. And I love remembering that I'm under 40 because I often don't feel like I am. So yeah, that was such an honor. And to be among a list of people who were like, working with chronic pain with like infants, and then me, I'm
and
like,
you're like,
okay.
I'm here too. Cool.
Yeah, oh, cool. I'm an activist, queer artist. Cool. No, it was really like a fantastic honor. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you do such amazing stuff, and you're really out there giving voice for a lot of people. So the first thing I would wanted to talk with you today is queers in quarantine. I think is the broad term of it.
Yeah.
This is an interesting time for people. Some people, it's not working out for them. They're not enjoying this, and others are finding the way to do it. So yeah, what do you think about how people can manage during this time as a queer person?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I think about is when this started happening. I've worked with, queer folks and in faith communities and all of those interesting intersections for almost a decade. And the thing that I've really seen is isolation for a lot of queer folks is not a new thing, in terms of, just having to, number one, deal with whatever portions of your immediate or extended family might not still be in contact with you. And so having to sort of curate your life and your rituals around, different things than what most people may need to. And at the same time, we also have to sort of curate our friend group in a different way, just because of safety, of being able to have some folks to relate to, and there's some complex things that come with that. So, I mean, that's definitely not the challenge for everybody, but I think I would say at least an element of it is true for most. And so when this started, I was thinking about lots of the folks who I've met through the years who don't have contact with their family, or, don't have those connections that some of us can lean on when it's in a really, it's a really tender time for our hearts now, not just for our bodies. And so, I think that's why it's really important for us to continue to put ourselves out there in terms of connecting with the people who are our families in a lot of ways. And the thing that I love about being queer, I mean, the list is long, but is that we do have this sense of imagination that I think we've had, sort of evolved into for survival, because we have to imagine a future that doesn't exist yet in order to live towards it.
Yeah.
So, I call that, queer imagination, because we've, even to get to wherever we are in our lives right now, we have had to imagine a future that we didn't know if it existed or not. We didn't know if we would be okay. We didn't know if we would get to a certain point. And so, I encourage folks during this time, imagine that future of what it might be like, however you might be struggling, because we already have that skill. Yeah. And to sort of put that into place as well.
Well, you and I are two people who, queer folks who were alive when gay marriage wasn't even legal.
Right.
So we ourselves have seen, we had to have that dream and that hope that eventually, and there's still work to be done.
Yeah, I mean, we know of times that, it wasn't even a dream or a possibility to, even have family of any kind. Yeah. Right. And so I think that, what I always say is to have gratitude in one hand and anger in the other, because you're angry because so many things need to change, but also gratitude because we see that because of our tenacity, the things, it continues to move forward.
Yeah.
And yeah, I hope that one day, I know that one day we're going to look back and a lot of the things that we struggle with now are really going to be just dissipate.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And speaking back to another point, it's so many queer people have found their chosen family. But unfortunately, right now, and that's the situation for some people, is that they can't be with their chosen family. I think about a lot of the teenagers who are struggling and are in a home that may not be as accepting, and they found these group of friends who really help them be who they are, and right now they can't see them. Like, it's got to be really tough for those people, I imagine.
Absolutely. I mean, the one thing that we all want to feel, I think right now, is a sense of home, right? Whatever that means. So I mean, many folks are still working, it's not like everyone's sort of indoors, but I would say that we want to feel a sense of not just a house, but like a sense of safety or groundedness, right? Because it's surreal, right, what's happening right now. And I do think of those folks, and I know a lot of folks who are in situations, both like youth and adults, where it's not really a sense of home for them. And what I have seen, or what they've told me is really helping, is still finding ways to connect with that chosen family online, right? Even if they have to sort of do it late at night, or find creative ways to do it, or like go for their daily walk or whatever. And I think it's really incumbent on the folks who aren't in those situations to continue to create opportunities so that people know they're not alone,
Right.
because that's really, really essential. And so, I've tried to sort of have like chat times and conversation times on Zoom, and, like avail myself of that as well, because I think it's really critical at the best of times that we remember that we belong here.
Yeah.
It's our birthright to sort of be here and take up space. And at the same time, that we're not alone in that whatever we're struggling with, other people are dealing with too. But I would never say it's easy. Just tune in,
Yeah.
but there are ways that we can still connect. And I really hope that we can sort of tune into the skills that we have to
Yeah.
be creative about what that might look like.
Yeah. I don't think people who aren't queer realize um, when you're trying to figure out who you are and you're unsure of how people are going to react. Like, just the fact that you and I are having this conversation, there are people who want to listen to it but are afraid to let people know that they're listening to this conversation, this episode of
Mm-hmm.
Passion Time with Craig. That's unfortunate. People don't realize that, who aren't in the situation or who haven't been in the situation.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you probably experience this too, where there are so many people who, maybe they came out years ago and they're like, man, coming out is just like, whew. Like my parents were like, woohoo, threw me a coming out party,
Yeah.
And I actually said I was on this radio show one day, and there was like two gay guys on it with me, and they were asking me, do we need more coming out movies, right?
Yeah.
And both of them were like, no, I think we've got enough, like we're totally fine. And I just like looked at them, and I was just like, I mean, I was thinking really bad words, but basically I said like, really nicely, I said, that must be nice, right? Because, I'm really thankful that is reality for so many people. At the same time, if we feel comfortable, it still means lots of people are uncomfortable, because you and I were not at the point that we are today without, I know for me, 25 years, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we do have to remember that even in Canada, even in 2020, whatever, like you said, there are still a lot of folks who, young and old, whether 13-year-olds or honestly a 65-year-old CEO, right, are really terrified of what the consequence might be in their sphere of, being seen as what our society continues to unfortunately treat as other in many ways.
Yeah. No, it's crazy, and I'm hoping that this can, like COVID, can bring people together, but we're still seeing that it's still finding ways to separate us. Like, in a negative way. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like what's the saying my grandpa used to say, that doesn't, can you swear, or like what happens on here?
Yeah,
A
you
little
can
bit,
swear. Say
a
whatever
little
you
bit.
want.
Um, well, he basically, is like, if you kick over the bucket, either shit or honey comes out,
Yeah.
and so it's like the bucket's kicked over, and I think part of our true selves are being seen in terms of, what have we prioritized in our lives,
Right.
and you know what has our inner life been like in terms of caring about people who are in different situations than we are. And it's really unfortunate and sort of disillusioning in some ways about what that looks like.
Yeah.
And anger gratitude thing, at the same time, I think we're also realizing the goodness of some people or organizations that maybe we wouldn't have guessed.
Yeah.
um, and I find myself on what I call the Corona coaster all the time, of like being angry and then seeing the good. And I think that's normal. I don't think that any of us need to try to silver lining it all day long. uh,
No.
yeah.
It's we all should be able to see it, but yeah, we all have. You need to accept that sometimes you're just having some bad moments,
Hmm.
and then something great's going to happen, or you're going to see something or hear about something, and then you're going to be hit with emotion, and then be like me and just start crying because like that's so beautiful.
We're crying every day either way.
Yeah.
Either
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one thing I love about you, and we were talking about this before in message, and you like to bring humor into a lot of things, which I think is fantastic. That's what I like to do, and especially talking about like doing activist work. But why is humor such an important tool for you?
Hmm. So, for example, I had a queer feminist comedy ukulele band for 4 years. We were the top in our
As we all
genre.
have.
I would love for there to be like, 200 in Canada. So everyone just start one. Um, and one thing, because I've spent so much of my life sort of in, faith communities and studying theology and that kind of thing, um, doing that specific thing, even though I've done like comedy stuff in different ways in my life, was really interesting because I found that we could talk about, everything from, menstruation, like getting your first period and how like scary it is, to lesbian dating stereotypes, to birth control, to street harassment, all in like a comedy show.
Right.
And often we would have straight people come to our shows or whatever. Not that I don't like straight people, but sometimes you have to keep an eye on them, you know what I mean? And just kidding, everybody, I have a straight friend, I can say that. So um and so we would have people come who I would say just maybe couldn't relate with all of the the songs, like obviously.
Yeah.
And it would be really interesting because afterwards they would say to us like, I even had, a mom who brought her like teen sons to it. And she said, that a couple weeks later they were talking about something, and they were like, hey, that's street harassment. You're not supposed to do that, because of one of the songs they listened to. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it was really cool because we were able to sort of present these really complex topics in a way that was accessible for people who didn't hold any of those identities. And I think for me, like that was just as important as doing a sermon somewhere,
Right.
because really, I feel like we're doing the same thing. Like, are we doing actions that go towards our collective liberation or not? And I know that's like, oh, it's a big word, boring, but like, are we creating an environment where people can flourish, I guess. And I think comedy has a way to do that. And I don't know about you, and I'd love to hear it too, but like, I think comedy has saved me. Like, I remember the first time, one of my favorite authors is Anne Lamott, and she writes a lot about like, faith and her personal story and all of the sordid things that she's done in her life. And I remember I first read her book when I was like really, really still deeply into, in the evangelical, like very restrictive sort of life. And I remember I read her book, and after I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, is God not a Republican? Like, it just really like hit me, because she was so hilarious and she swore and she did all these things, but she had such a deep faith at the same time. And I think because she was able to sort of be herself and do it with comedy, I was like, oh, like I can sort of approach this in a different way. So I think that comedy is an unsung hero of activism, because it also just taps into humanity. And I've been totally transformed by it. I mean, when I go to an improv show or something, it feels like church to me. And
Yeah.
that's not an exaggeration at all, because it brings me to the present moment. And it reminds me of how I want to treat people and be treated.
Oh, 100%. I think comedy is so important and such a great way to break down and let people not realize they're learning or
Yeah.
hearing the truth, just because you're making these jokes and you just laugh. And when I remember being like young and making people laugh, and it was like, ooh, there's something here. Like
Hmm.
it's the best high you can get. And then when you can add in some real truth, and stuff that people didn't really realize at first, and they're like, oh, wait a minute, now I have to think about something. It's great.
Right. And it's not even I mean, I do think that we do have to do that. I mean, I need to be tricked into, being better. That's no, we all do need to sometimes in some
Yeah.
things. But I think it's also like, when I think about, if we want to, bring it back to politics for a minute, as we all do right now.
Yep.
But uh like I think that sometimes I think about, how would I want to be presented with maybe a new idea or something that might be challenging for me? Like,
Yeah.
how would I want to be, invited into this new way of thinking? And I think actually doing it with comedy is a really loving act to people who might think differently from you, because you're able to really expose it with honesty and humor. And I really would say it's an invitation to people to, like, hey, maybe think about it this way, or think about that other people experience something that's different from you. And you can say yes or no to an invitation, but it's there for you. And, and I think that is what I've appreciated when people have done that for me, about the myriad of topics and experiences that I have no clue about, right?
Yeah.
And so, I think it's really an act of kindness if we're able to create, comedy that does that. And then people can say yes or no to whether they want to be open to that.
Yeah. I have to mention, you were actively involved, and I'm so happy that it went the way it went. But leading demonstrations and protests to City Hall about conversion therapy ban, which thankfully it was passed, so it's not allowed. But why was that such an important thing for you to be a part of?
Mm. Yeah, so many reasons. The first thing I think of is just, my own past in being in really restrictive religious communities, and knowing what kind of, shame is perpetuated on queer folks in those settings, um, that lasts for decades, even after you might be out of those settings. And, working with hundreds of people who have gone through some form of conversion therapy, modern conversion therapy, whatever it might be, and understanding the devastation that it takes. I mean, uh, often, like you said, there's many things that people don't necessarily understand about the queer experience. So, if you were straight and you could never do anything about that for your whole life, and you were told you're going to be going to hell if you did,
Yeah.
that might ruin your day, like, um, so I mean, that's a big piece, like the personal piece of just the humans that I know who have gone through that, and like I said, people who are older and also really young folks. And I think part of it too, for me, that was really important, is to be really public about being a queer person of faith,
Mhm.
because I think the narrative is either or,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes on both sides. You can be queer and you can, have that part of your identity, or you can be a person of faith and you can be, acceptable or whatever in that sphere. And I think a lot of my work, including in this, is about destroying that illusion that it's separate, and being able to claim all the parts of your identity that are meaningful to you. So, you know, I'm not going to allow myself to be fractured because somebody said that all the pieces of myself doesn't belong. And I think a big piece of, you know, fighting against conversion therapy is letting queer folks know, and those who also are trying to do this work, that we don't have to fracture ourselves in order to belong. And actually, it's the opposite of being a person of faith, because we want people to be more of themselves and not less. So I think it was really important to me to stand in that space, because I think often it makes people uncomfortable for me to say I'm a gay Christian. They're like, oh, what? You're using our word, you know? And yet, you know,
moron, what are you doing?
yeah, exactly. And also, you know, just to be visible in that sense of that I'm a person who, you know, that I'm okay, that I made it through that, because there's a lot of folks who don't think they're ever going to be okay. And they, you know, and why wouldn't they? They believe that they're going to be alone if they get, you know, thrown out of this community. Like the consequences are really high, right? And so, and I also think there's a lot of misconceptions about the prevalence of conversion therapy, that it was really important for me to let folks know that, yeah, a lot of people are like, oh yeah, well, doesn't, you know, phew, glad it hasn't happened since the 70s and whatever. And you're like, actually, you know, that church down the road from you, they do it every Wednesday night. Right. And so, you know, I think part of it was shattering that illusion just so that we can, you know, do something about it. And the modern forms of conversion therapy are just as harmful, but they're a lot sneakier, right? And so I was really glad about the unanimous vote to put it forward. And I think that was, you know, the result of the unanimous vote was a lot of work by a lot of people. And I'm really excited for when, you know, we can sort of move forward with making the bylaws for it, because there has to be real repercussions for people who continue, because we know they will. And so, you know, they're breaking the law, they're promising something that they can't deliver on. And in the meantime, they're hurting a lot of people. So I'll keep fighting that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And as we should, it's crazy. And people don't also realize that like there needs to be just unanimous bans everywhere, because there are plenty of people who are just shipping their kids down to certain states that are still allowing it. Like things are still happening.
Yeah, I mean, geographically, you know, that's the thing. It's a really insidious practice. And so there's lots of different tendrils that go everywhere. So, I mean, it needs to be a global thing, right? Because that the message is you can't torture somebody for being who they are. You know, I mean, really, that's in one sentence, that's what we're saying. It's a human right. Like, whether or not you believe that, you know, I'm going to go to hell or whatever, you can't torture me for being who I am. Right. And if you think that I'm going to hell, let me go on my way in peace. You know, it's like, okay, cool. Like, fine. That's what you think. And I'll be over here doing my thing. You know what I mean? Like, that's fine. That doesn't bother me. So yeah, we have to really, there's a diversity of strategies that we're going to need to continue this.
So the first time you went to do a sermon, what was going through you? Were you nervous? Like I mean, it's a speech, but a sermon and having all these people and they're listening to you, what was that like for you?
Oh, my first time. I'm nervous every time. So let me think about one of the first ones that I did. I don't know what the topic was, but I can tell you what I felt like. Um, in my tradition, you know, growing up, there was a lot of heaviness, I think, on the person as a preacher, right? Because there was this idea like, and now I'm the voice of God, you know, and I that's a lot of pressure, right? And so, you know, I obviously had like moved beyond, you know, that kind of thinking, but, you know, I remember as I was like writing it, it was really important to me to to say, like, this is what I'm reflecting on right now, because I don't know. Like, at the end of the day, there's not a lot of things that I'm sure about. Like, I know that I'm loved by something greater than myself, but I'm not going to deliver this message that I think that is ultimate truth.
Right.
Uh, and so I was really nervous, because, especially because of how I grew up, I was like, okay, I feel like I have this expectation on me that, nobody, my parents weren't in the room when I was doing it. But also, I was lucky enough to be around people who were examples of just somebody being human and telling a story, and, using this book that's full of stories and myths and poetry and whatever, called the Bible, and also lots of other sacred texts and books and the newspaper, to think about, how do we be kinder and better people in the world, and how do we be of service. And so I think, it still scares me every single time,
Yeah.
like, because anytime you sort of take that position where you're sort of sharing, um, I don't think that I'm representing anything divine. At the same time, I consider it a sacred opportunity.
Yeah.
So I don't ever take it for granted, or anything like that, because um, it would be awful to get to a point where you would feel that way. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that it comes with an inherent anxiety to just be yourself, and not try to, go into the church voice, or whatever, and to present something that you've learned, or that you're reflecting on, or that you're struggling with, because that's kind of what it is.
Yeah. So me personally, I at first, I was like, I'm gay, whatever, it doesn't matter. I don't like to make a big deal about it. And then I saw people, like, there's still so much struggles going on, that I was like, all right, I'm gonna use my voice, like with the podcast, have episodes where we can talk about this stuff. And then another thing, that, like, I lost my mom when I was really young, and I didn't want to be the poster child for, like, kids who lose their mom. But
Mm.
then again, growing up and seeing people struggle, I'd become very involved with Hospice Calgary, and I was like, you know what? Okay, I didn't set out to be that face or that voice, but if I can help others, I'll do that. And so, what was it that was for you? Like, were you planning on always being this person who's gapping the faith and queerness, queer communities, or was it something that you're like, I have to help people?
Mm. I was never ever my plan. Like, I mean, to even be out as gay wasn't even in my plan ever. Like, I was married to a guy, like, so, no, it wasn't on my radar, at all. I think maybe similarly to you, um, once I did sort of get out of the crux of that journey of being able to sort of come out and, like, breathe for a couple of years and be like, oh, okay, I'm still here. No lightning bolts.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like I'm doing okay. My hair's way better and I can kiss girls. Like, okay, phew, didn't think I could get here.
Yeah.
And so, kind of doing that. But then I just realized, like you said, that, I think for me, it was, maybe I was like 26, 25 or 26, when I just, like, started coming out. Right.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's never too late.
No.
But for me, um, I realized that so many people had such a long journey between, when they could be themselves, when they
Yeah.
couldn't, and when they could be themselves. And, I looked back, and it's not like I looked back on my entire life and I'm like, oh, all those years are wasted. Um, but at the same time, it's more the pain that I think about of the years, right? And, that I didn't get the rites and rituals that so many other people got. And mostly just, I mean, it's so fucking shitty to not like who you are,
Yeah.
you know? And it's devastating. And we know some people don't make it,
Mhm.
right? And I get it. I understand. Like, and I think for me, over time, I realized the biggest perpetrator is bad religion.
Yeah.
And it was for me. And, most discrimination against queer folks is still religiously motivated.
Mhm.
And so as I struggled with how I was going to continue to identify or not as a person of faith, or what that was going to look like, and ultimately decided, like, no, like, this is as much of my identity as anything else, and nobody can tell me whether I have access to God or not.
Yeah.
So fuck that. I'm going to have all the access in the world. So, but I realized that, like, if that's the case, then it's my responsibility also to do harm reduction and harm prevention, so that toxic theology and religion doesn't continue to kill our people.
Right.
And so, and to shorten that gap between hating yourself and loving yourself and being able to flourish. Because, all I think about is it's not about miracle working. It's not about feeling like, oh yeah, people can love themselves in one day. It's just, can we shorten the time in between shame and flourishing? Can we just shorten it a little bit? So if my life can help to shorten somebody's journey from 10 years to 8 years, or one last month, or whatever,
Yeah.
then it's worth it. And then also, if I'm able to sort of bring light to that religion, actually good religion is not harmful, and be able to sort of disentangle ourselves from this idea that homophobia and transphobia and all this stuff is holy,
Yeah.
which a lot of people think I need to do this, I'm compelled to do this. Then also we can work on the folks who have that inherent feeling, who are oppressing, queer folks. And so hopefully from both sides, we can sort of expose that so that we can all live freer. And I would say, and it's really interesting, that the work that I've done is just as helpful for straight people,
Right.
uh, you know, that's great. No, just kidding. But what I think about that is, if I'm allowed to be me in my gender expression, in my whatever, it also means that a straight person, a straight guy, hey, wear nail polish if you want.
Yeah.
Hey, hug your guy friends if you want. Hey, do this. Hey, do that. Like, why do we don't need to be in these boxes. There's not a certain way to be a man. There's not a certain way to be a woman. And whoever you love or whoever you're attracted to, you can express yourself in a way that feels life-giving to you.
Yeah.
And so I really do feel, just how they say, like, in high schools when they have GSAs, gay straight alliances, the people who actually flourish the most in those schools are straight boys.
Yeah.
Because they don't feel as much of a pressure to be a certain way as a man, and
Yeah.
they feel more accepted. And so I hope the collateral benefit actually benefits everybody, because we're all stuck in some way and feeling like we have to conform to a certain way of dressing, being, acting, whatever. And so I hope that my work has that spillover, although the queer community obviously is going to be the heart and the core of what makes me keep doing it, even when, sometimes it's extremely, extremely hard and emotionally draining, and all of those things. Like the queer folks who have gone before me and done this work are the ones who keep me going too. So I think that answers your question. I get excited about it.
Well, and I mean, it's going back to, oh, do we still need coming out films? We do, because people still, and it's there's a lot of straight people who still don't understand. I remember when it came out that they were going to change the rules about GSAs, and and I was explaining to my buddy Brad. He was like, I don't get it. Like he's like, I wouldn't have a problem, like, if he's got a 6-month-old, and he's like, if Jake was in this, like, I would want him to tell me, like, and I wouldn't care. Like, I was like, yes, but the problem isn't you, Brad. The problem is the other parents who don't want a gay kid, And
Right.
so if the school calls and says, hey, just so you know, your kid's in the GSA, and they might be straight even, they just might be an ally, that's going to cause an uproar. And that's when Brad was like, oh,
Right.
and he got it there. And that's just it. Like, people aren't figuring it out still. We're still needing to tell these stories.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I know so many kids who like go to trans kids who dress a certain way at home and then go and dress a different way that is, feels like themselves at school, right? We know countless people who do that. I know people who are executives who that don't ever have a picture of their, same-sex partner on their desk because they know what that might mean for them, right? So, I mean, like you said, I'm thankful for anytime I hear, and I shouldn't be this grateful, but anytime I hear of parents who accept their kids, I'm like, whew,
Yeah.
because, it should be just like a given, but unfortunately it's not. But yeah, we have to remember that there are still folks who exist where that is like a deal breaker. Like the consequences are unimaginable for most of us of what that might look like. Um, and that's why stuff like the GSA rules, I even had a gay parent talk to me about that. Let's put a little responsibility on all of us, including queer folks. A gay parent who said like, oh well, I would want to know if my kid, kind of the same thing. And I was looking at them just being like, what? And they were like, oh yeah, like I don't want them to hide anything from me. And it was great. We'd have the conversation. And I was like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, and I had to have the same conversation because I don't think any of us are immune. Like I said before, if we feel comfortable, we're just like, cool,
Yeah.
like, I don't understand why it's a big thing. And sometimes we have to go back and tap back into the time when we weren't comfortable.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how old you are, but, I don't like, so I have 12 years ago when my life was like completely different and I couldn't have imagined anything about my current reality. And I have to go and look back at that. And I'm lucky enough, even though it's a little heartbreaking, that I'm still in contact with people every day who are in those places. And it reminds me to never think that my comfort means that everybody's at that level.
Yeah. No, and that's just it. Not everybody is, and there's a reason, whether you have a gay parent or gay uncle or whatever, there's a reason why the the kid maybe not coming to you yet and telling you. Like,
Right.
so you have to be that. You need to realize that.
And, and to a lot of parents' surprise, it's not about you, like, um,
What?
no.
Groundbreaking news here, guys.
Right. And it's like, I've had parents ask me, well, how do I, my kid didn't tell me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, they did now, you
Yeah.
know, because most of us, if we were asked before we were ready to even in our own selves figure it out or feel safe enough or confident enough as, whatever our truth is, like to articulate it. I'm sorry, but our culture has done a really good job at making us like validly fear
Yeah.
what's going to happen. So even parents who are great and accepting, sometimes feel shocked and hurt. And I get that because they want to be there for their kid, and that's fair. But at the same time, that's just how we are right now as a society. And so the reality is that if they don't hear it from you, if they don't hear the discrimination from you, they're still hearing it from somewhere.
Right.
And so I think what I really love, and if you're a parent, feel free to do this if it works for you, but one of my really good friends, she said when she had 3 kids, and as they grew up, she would just ask them from time to time, like, she's like, oh, you talk, oh, do you have any crushes? And they, the boys would say, oh yeah, well, this girl, blah, blah, blah. And then she's like, okay, but if you ever like boys, that's fine too.
Yeah.
Like she would just put it in casual conversation. Oh, if you ever have a crush on a boy, that's totally fine. Like, and at some point they all said to her, Mom, we're not gay, but like, I think she was a bit disappointed, but, but obviously in that context, like because it was just a part of what she did their whole lives, not only does that send a message to them that, oh, it might change, I might actually, you know, my crushes might change or whatever, it also, you know, inherently distilled into them that when they met people who also were attracted to different genders and different sexes, that it wasn't a big deal. Right. So I thought that that was a really mind-blowing thing to me, because imagine if, you know, our parents, or the people who took care of us, said those things as we were growing up, like how transformational that would be.
Oh yeah. No, and that's just it. There needs to be more of this stuff, and there needs to be, you know, in kids films and stuff, just these little things like Pixar's Onward. First of all, it's a fantastic freaking movie, but just that little moment of having a female character mention her girlfriend,
Yeah,
like
I
that's
totally, yeah, I totally remember. I just watched that. Craig, what's happening? We're connecting on a cellular level. I
yeah,
just I just watched that last week, and I was like, I loved it. I was like, what, gay content? Like, I almost joined 1 Million Moms for a second, because I was just like shocked, right? And then I was like, oh, right, like this is real, you know? It was just like so shocking to me. I'm like, in a kids movie, you know? But it was just so beautiful to think kids are seeing it, and it's just like, oh, it's just reality, because we exist, and even if you don't say it exists, the moon is still there, right?
yeah.
And so and then also just the relationship between the brothers too. Oh, made me cry.
Oh,
Okay, no
I
spoilers, but I mean,
I started crying as soon as the movie started, and I was like,
yeah.
what's happening to me?
It's beautiful, and I love it that there's more stories that are not about a male female love relationship, right?
And then it's Onward and Frozen, and it's movies about siblings, and that's what I love, and I want more of that. You know, or even it doesn't have to be siblings, just about friendship, like just
Yeah.
that. Like it doesn't always need like. So that was the thing. I remember when everybody was talking about Frozen 2, and it was like, ooh, they're gonna make Elsa gay. Oh, let's make Elsa gay. And I thought, I was like, you know what? I don't care if she's gay or straight. I would just prefer if they don't feel like they have to make her fall in love with someone.
Right.
That was the thing for me. I was like, why do these stories always have to be about falling in love? Like, let's just have it be a story about something else.
Yeah, or have it be a story about falling in love and, you know, in a Pixar movie and getting divorced. You know, like that's that's the reality. I want to see a Pixar movie where people get divorced. I want them to be in court. I want the custody battle. I want it all. Okay, Pixar, get on it. Like divorcing Nemo. You know what I mean? You've heard it here first. But yeah, like just reality. It's not just about romance,
Yeah.
and that's not all we need to have fulfilling lives, shit, right? Like, I mean, the thing that I love about my friends is they can never be exes, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, and you know, even more than my family, like, you know. And I think that, you know, instilling that in kids, that this love relationship is the crux of all meaning, um, is really dangerous, right? Because then you grow up thinking, oh, well, this is my reality,
Yeah.
instead of, I mean, that's what I loved about the first Frozen. I haven't seen the second one, so I'm trying not
Not
to.
as not as good. The
Okay.
music's fantastic, but yeah.
Okay, it's on my queue on Disney Plus. Hey, these are
Fair
hard times. I subscribed to Disney Plus 2 days after self-isolation. Okay, I like, we all need what we need.
Yep.
um and you know, but I loved the thing about the sisters, right? And it was interesting that like Fox News was like, oh, these sisters are gay for each other, and I'm like, just what? Like, I'm like, where are your minds going?
Yeah.
that it's like, oh, it's just sisters, like no one's like falling in love with anybody, but someone's got to fall in love with somebody, so here it is, you know. Like, it's just so gross. But yeah, I'm loving that movies are pulling away a little bit from that, you know, also heterosexual you know, narrative, and into, I don't know, what we want our reality to be, that
Yeah.
our life is fulfilled by lots of different people and things.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know, I think about Schitt's Creek, and Dan Levy said early on, he was like, "Oh, we're not going to do an episode where there's homophobia or hate or anything like that." He's like, doesn't exist in Schitt's Creek. And I just love that he created this world where it was just whatever, and they did so many great stuff. But like that's the way it should be. Like just make those things.
Yeah, we need all of those narratives. Like you said, we still need coming out narratives. We need, where to show the real struggle. But we also just need where it's like, I want like a lesbian like buddy cop movie where they don't ever talk about being lesbians.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and I want all of those things. Like we need all of those things just like it exists for, hetero folks,
Yeah.
right? Because if you are heterosexual, you can find a lot of combinations of whatever you want to watch, right?
Yeah.
And but usually you're not struggling with whether you tell your parents you're straight and your whole life is ruined, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'd like to see that one, but I did write a play called Heterophobia that has that storyline, so
That's awesome.
yeah. But I think yeah, I loved that about Schitt's Creek too. And also like, I don't know if I ever, it's not going to happen, but if I ever wanted to date a guy, it would be Dan Levy, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, oh, I like looking at you. Like, so that's part of it too. And I think it's really beautiful when we can like just feel, there's a difference between us feeling co-located.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like we're allowed to co-locate,
Yeah.
with other normal people in the world and co-locate with our coworkers and our family and just, yeah, hey, no problem. You can kind of be here. Right.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, that's progress. But like, we deserve much more than that. We deserve to belong and to not just be able to kind of like sit around and, be around other people, but to belong amongst. And I think Schitt's Creek is a great example of that.
Yeah, no, it's a perfect example because it also brings humor, and so there's people who are watching it and are just laughing, and then all of a sudden they're learning about something. So again, going back to what we talked about earlier, humor, super important.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know people who I'm like, oh, I don't think that they're like, I'm wondering if they're very progressive, and they're like, this is the last season of Modern Family, and you're just like, okay, so it's funny because I think sometimes we can be hard on I just said hard on. Okay.
That's our time. Bye.
And you just take that clip from it.
Yeah.
But I think that we can be tough on, not trying to shame the penis or anything. Okay. But I think we can be tough on, like, as queer folks, we can be tough on queer representation in movie. Like you'd say, oh, well, that's not real, that, why aren't you doing this and this and this? And for the most part, that's completely valid because you're having a lot of people make decisions on this media that are just guessing, right?
Yeah.
At the same time, that's valid. At the same time, I'm thankful for when it's in the mainstream, like Modern Family, for example.
Yeah.
And other iterations, because maybe it's a bite-sized piece, but I know that my aunt is going to watch it.
Yeah.
She's not going to be watching the L Word, I don't know, maybe at night she does. But maybe at 2 a.m. when it comes on, reruns are on Showtime. But I think, there's a place for everything, like we said before, there's a place for it being, unfortunately, we're still at a time where bite-sized pieces are necessary for some people. And that's just where they're at. Okay. Like you and I still need bite-sized pieces of some things that we are still working on. Right. Yeah. And I'm really glad that like sort of, full-fledged queer content made by queer people. Oh, it's a lesbian playing a lesbian. And wait a minute, she doesn't die, that's really great. But I'm thankful for like all of it, like every single piece of it, that little mention and onward, like it all makes a difference in terms of, building into that we're all human. Yeah. We all just want to experience love and friendship and a sense of belonging and home. Like we said at the beginning, we want to have a sense of home and like we belong here. Yeah. And there's a reason for us being here. And so whatever that representation looks like, And as it continues to evolve, I'm thankful for every little bit of it that happens, because that honestly, that gets us closer to maintaining our dignity and staying alive.
Right. Oh, totally. So as we start to wrap up here, one thing I've been asking people is, we've got a lot of free time on our hands. So what's a show or that you recommend to binge, or movie that people should check out?
Ooh, I've been Netflix watch partying with one of my good friends, Sense8.
Oh yes, I
I don't,
haven't watched that.
yeah, well, I heard about it forever, ever. And, sometimes I'm like, oh, everyone loves it. I'm different, like,
Yeah, I relate to that so well.
right? And you're just like, I'll wait. Let's see, 5 years later. And then you're like, why did I wait?
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at right now. So it is, speaking of queer representation, like, fuck, it is so good. It's the most queer people I've ever seen in a cast that isn't a specifically, not like the L Word or, Queer Eye for the whatever it's called these days.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I don't know.
I haven't ever seen Queer Eye. And so a lot of gay guys just tuned me out. Sorry. But yeah, Sense8 is like, just an amazing story. And it's made by the Wachowskis,
Yeah.
which is amazing. So like actually a trans woman creating a show that has a trans woman who is a trans woman in like, just, I mean, beauty upon beauty. And the story is just fantastic too. And okay. Everyone's seen it, and it's controversial. Tiger King. It shook me, Craig. It shook me.
It shook you.
I'm shook. I'm still shook by it. So some people they can't do it, and I totally get it. But if you'll know in the first episode if you're going to go along for the ride or not.
And
And
I wasn't. I barely
oh,
finished the first episode. I'm one of those.
okay.
I'm one of those people, and I think there is a part of me that's like, oh, everybody's talking about it. Everybody loves it.
It's not even love it. It's just like it was just so I couldn't stop watching. Like I don't know what it was, but now I can believe me. I have so much material to send memes to teen boys, like my friends' kids. So I
Yeah.
mean, that's a benefit. That Great Canadian Baking Show.
Oh yeah.
Hello, Dan Levy once again in great outfits.
Yeah.
Eating a bunch of treats, I'm like, yeah, eat that cake, Dan Levy. You look cute, right?
That
So
sounds like porn to me. Dan Levy was into it in a big way.
yeah, get on there. Yeah, I mean, I would say whatever people, whatever comfort stuff that you want to watch, get Disney Plus if you can do the $8 and, get the stuff that is, meaningful to you right now. And it's okay. It's okay to, whatever you're doing to cope is okay, as long as it's not hurting anybody and it's consensual and whatever. Try to eat a vegetable once in a while is the advice I give to myself. But it's a surreal time. It's an unprecedented time, and so we're going to have to learn how to deal with it in unprecedented ways, right?
Yeah.
So if it's Tiger King or not, or Sense8, or I mentioned the L Word or not, that or add that in.
Yeah.
Then we have to do, like, in order for us to sort of feel like we can still connect to human stories is really important right now.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think it's very important, and yeah, I think people will need to find that nice mix and balance of like, yeah, today you're just gonna watch some really stupid movies, and tomorrow you're gonna watch something where you can learn something.
Yeah.
Do whatever you need to do.
Yeah, and knowing that what's expected of you now might be different from what it was before. So
Yeah.
if there's a way that you can be of service, if there's a way that you can still, contribute in some way, then that's awesome. And if this is a time for you to, have it's a little bit quieter and finances are kind of okay for you right now, then also embrace what that might mean for you.
That's perfectly said. Well said. So if people want to find out more about you, talk to you, book you for things, the best way is you've got a website, right?
Yeah, I got a website. It's pamrocker.com. That's PAMROCKER. That is my real name. Um,
I don't believe it.
it totally is. I'm so lucky. So, whoever is out there who is going to marry me, you're taking my name if you want. You don't have to,
Yeah.
but I'm not taking yours, and I'm not even going to hyphenate this shit. Like,
Yeah.
no
Yeah.
way. And yes, pamrocker.com. Or you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Real Pam Rocker.
Yeah. Well, I thank you so much for being on today. It was such a pleasure to talk to you. I think you're doing incredible things, and more people need to see there's people like you out there, and bridging the gap and standing up for people and doing what you think is important. So I think it's awesome what you're doing. You rock.
Oh, that's awesome. I want that soundbite. I just want to say thank you. Thanks for your time and attention. And, you're doing great work. This is a contribution for our communities, just to continue to hear human stories about people who we may not know about. And we need that right now. So I appreciate the work that you're doing too. And I hope that people, can tune in and just remember that there is good as well.
Yeah. There is good. And let's keep promoting and showing that there is good. And, if there's anything people want to promote, it should be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
Thanks, Craig.
thank you so much, Pam. So make sure to check her out, pamrocker.com, and then, of course, on Instagram, Facebook, and then make sure to follow us on Instagram as well at PTW Craig, or like us on Facebook at Passing Time with Craig. Thank you, Pam, and we'll chat soon.